So I do a lot of planning, especially for parents, right? Because they want to make sure that when something happens to them at one point in time, at least their children that they are leaving behind should be in a good position, continue to have the same standards of life that they introduced to them, or in fact have an even better standard of life. But one of the things that I have seen is that as much as people are planning for these children are not being incorporated in these discussions, and these children do not even understand the most important principles that they should have, so that when these things get into their hands, they are able to handle them accordingly. A lot of the times when we're having these discussions with the parents especially, you'll find that a lot of people have headaches, they have stress, they have anxiety, because they want to make sure that these kids will be okay. At the same time, they want to make sure that there are no loopholes. There's no possibility of this child squandering this, because I know without me, things would not be okay. So a lot of people come from that place. But then, like I said, we are not incorporating them. And what happens because of the lack of incorporating these important beings that we are thinking about? Every time they receive something that is not structured into their hands, they blow it within a very short space of time. I'm talking about 21-year-olds, I'm talking about 25-year-olds, even 30, 35-year-olds, right? Can we really blame them? Not all the time. But one of the things that I want us to think about and to incorporate, and I'm going to show you or talk to you about some of the things that you should be thinking about, so that they get some form of training and understanding of how to deal with the situation. Obviously, it's never nice for you to have a discussion with your child with a vision in mind that you won't be there, right? But then again, if you instill certain principles in them right now, when something does happen to you, it's going to be easy or, much better for them to handle that situation, unlike you keeping them away from everything. Let's have this discussion, right? For the folks that are new here, hi there. My name is Yolanda Mnyengeza. I'm an attorney and a director at a law firm here in Johannesburg, South Africa, which is called Mnyengeza Attorneys. And for the guys that are coming back here for the second, third time, hi again. It's good to have you here. Guys, let's not waste time. This is going to be a bit of a long one because I want us to have this discussion at length. Let's go. So what are these principles that I say we need to be thinking about, that we should offset to these kids, right? Obviously, you're worried about their well-being if something happens to you. So what kind of conversations should you be having with them? I mean, first things first, let's talk about you running that business of yours. I know you're running it alone. A lot of us are running these businesses alone. But then again, we see what these businesses do for our families. They cater for them. And we want them to continue to cater for them. But then at the same time, we know that these kids who are leaving these businesses too, they're not going to be able to do what? To continue working these businesses, because what skill do they have? What do they understand about it? So I think the obvious thing here as a business owner, if you have in mind the intention that this business will continue to operate and benefit your kids, is you better be incorporating those kids into that business. They need to understand how it's run. They need to understand the key people of that business. They need to understand the issues of that business, how it operates on a day-to-day basis. How is this going to happen? You're going to drag them to that business. Even if in the future they were to decide now, or they decide that they don't want to be a part of it, but you would have instilled, you would have offset the necessary principles and skills for them to be able to hold the fort when something happens, right? Whether you pass away or you're actually extremely sick, then you know that they can hold the fort and then continue running that business. That's the first thing you should be doing. So from time to time, you're going to drag them there. They're going to help you do certain tasks, because you also have to train a protege here. Because if you're saying you want it to continue, who's going to take it over? Because what then is going to happen is that they're going to just decide, okay, if they want to continue with it, they might just do so. But what's going to happen? It's not going to succeed. They can't just learn on the job, whereas the business has been continuing. Nobody's going to wait for them, right? So you teach them when? Now. You offset the skills when? Now, so that they understand. They also need to understand this business because they need to know how it flows in terms of cash flow. Because people who never got exposure, this is the reason why a business would never last, is because they don't understand how the money has to cycle here. They see money coming through the doors and then they think, oh my goodness, we've actually had a jackpot this month. But that's not the case. They probably have to have some money in reserves. They need to know how much this business needs in order for it to continue to operate, right? They need to have plans for finances because they don't know what could happen. Now, how are they going to know all of this if you don't incorporate them in this business? Yet you expect that this business must continue to operate and work for them. This is why a lot of people have headaches. They stress about this. You better just know that your stress, understandable. And let me tell you, the chances of this happening if you don't incorporate these kids in these businesses or you don't offset these skills are 99%. I don't need to do any form of investigations or calculations. I know for a fact. All right, so that's the first thing that you do. So the other thing that you want to think about is the issue of immovable property. This is also one thing that has a lot of people stressed out because the worry is that I hope these children are not going to encumber these immovable properties. I hope they're not going to sell them, whereas I've worked so hard to acquire them, right, to help them. I hope that they're going to find value in them and take care of them. And that's why you find that people want to explore this option of actually moving properties into a trust because they're so scared about the way in which these kids may treat or handle these properties that they're going to leave behind. So what does this mean? This means that we now have to open channels of communication. It means we now have to offset principles, offset understanding to these kids so that they can be able to handle these immovable properties, right? Guys, when I say kids, I'm just referring to children that are over the age of 18, right? So don't be confused because the other ones can't take care of themselves. So we need to be having these discussions with them so that they see value in what you say you have built and why you need them to take care of them. Because at the end of the day, you're saying you're doing it for them, but do they understand where you're coming from? Are they with you? Because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are going to be left with these properties. Because some people do want to set up trusts, but they cannot for so many other reasons, right? And so as a result, then they just have to will their properties. This is where the stress is now. I wonder if these kids are going to be able to keep these properties as they are because they are beneficial. Are you having those discussions with those children? Do they understand that? So what are you supposed to be doing? First things first, you're supposed to be exposing them to the nitty-gritties of running a property. They need to know what rates and taxes are, how they operate, right? They need to know how much it costs to pay for electricity in a household like this. They need to know levies in an estate. How do they work? They need to know exactly the value of this property and how to run it. Because a lot of people, once they start getting bombarded by these things after you've passed away, that's when they're like, oh, you know what, let's just sell. Because it's too much at one go. But had you exposed them to this type of information and understanding of how properties function, I think that the response would be different. You wouldn't have to say, hey, can we put in conditions to try and restrict them? Mind you, these conditions that people often ask us to put in place cannot be documented, and because they're not going to be enforceable at all. Another thing, you also want to talk to the children that you're saying you're leaving these properties for about these actual properties that you've purchased. They need to understand that they were not acquired at ease. And there's a reason why you want them to keep them, right? Because they don't understand this. Here's another thing. When people come from ease, at times they don't understand the value because they never had to, work as hard as you probably did to acquire all the things that you have. They were just born into ease and wealth. And so when they feel like selling something after you've passed away, to them, they believe that, oh, okay, maybe we can be able to acquire one at some stage in life. So you need to then educate, offset your understanding and principles onto them. So this way you'll have a bit of ease, right? Also, when it comes to encumbering such properties, you need to open up and talk to them about the different types of situations they could possibly find themselves, which could end up actually exposing and encumbering these properties, marriages, getting into credit, etc. They need to know better. Educate them. If you get married in a certain way, these are the possibilities. So by the time you enter, at least have that in mind, have an understanding, right? There's a dad and daughter that came the other day. I love the fact that the dad actually was talking about the very same things that, adults often talk about amongst themselves, and was saying that, I understand you're of age, talking to his daughter, but then this is what you must be mindful of as you grow, because these properties are going to be for you. And you could see the daughter was able to grasp what the dad was saying. So these are important conversations you should have, because we're sitting here as adults and everyone is like, why didn't someone tell me about this? I don't know how many times I speak to people and everyone is like, or those people rather are like, why didn't anyone tell me about this? Why isn't, anyone educating about this? Unfortunately, nobody has an obligation to educate you about anything. Now, right now, as you are sitting there, you have the luxury of information. It's exposed. We are in the information age. What do you now do? You upset it. You give it to the younger ones so that they understand and make better choices. Because this is also what results in properties being lost, them being encumbered and entangled in certain situations. The other thing I want us to talk about, this one, is money. Money is also the other problem, because people, again, everybody's trying to find a way as to how they can hide the money somewhere, somehow, so that these kids can just get a little of it, not much of it, because they know they will lose it. Why will they lose it? Why is it that when these kids, or rather adult children, when they get access to these monies or funds, they have to lose them as soon as they get them? A year is even very long for them to have that amount of money, whereas it's actually in the millions of rands. So again, you need to be teaching these kids about finances, how to handle them. You need to make them understand finances. This is very important. It's critical, because some of the monies you're leaving behind, we can structure them in certain entities like a trust, and then they'll come out in bits and pieces, right? They can stretch for a longer period of time. But then again, we've got some money, such as pension funds, which are very difficult to restrict, which could be paid to beneficiaries as a lump sum. That one is totally different to handle. And so when it gets to those children, at least let it get to them with an understanding of how to handle it. Expose them, teach them. Do not just give them money on a month-to-month basis, but give them principles as to how they should be handling monies. Give them responsibilities, with monies. Because another problem we have is that we probably have money and we expose children to a certain lifestyle, and we continue to house this lifestyle of theirs, and until, right, the last age, I don't know what, but we house them on our own without them being exposed as to how to handle money, as to how responsibilities are taken care of, and how far money actually stretches. As a result, you'll find that a lot of the children we're leaving behind don't even understand what the value of R1,000,000 is. In their minds, they're thinking it's going to last 10 years, right? Maybe 15 years. And as a result, when they get it, they don't utilize it in the correct manner. This is why then it's important to introduce this education to them so that they understand and can handle it better. And on this aspect of money, there's an issue here. Because children don't understand money, there's a lot of things that they also don't understand. They don't understand paperwork. They don't understand the things that are written. And they cannot see the red flags. And where am I going with this? There's so many children who are being defrauded by family members and others because they don't understand anything about how things operate. A child gets someone who comes to them to say, listen, this is what you must sign, this is what you must do, this is what's going to happen. And they sell the story to them. These kids sign, they don't read, and what happens? Their money is gone. And at the back of their mind, they're thinking, oh, I've got money somewhere sitting. They were defrauded just like that because they have no understanding about anything. This is why you need to open the channels of communication, because this disadvantages the kids you're leaving behind. So these are the three main things I'm just going to talk about today that you need to start talking about, teaching kids about, making them understand, because these are the three main things that have the ability to spin their lives around, to change them. That business, it houses their most important income, takes care of their needs. The immovable property, it takes care of their day-to-day living. You're giving a child an immovable property that still has outstanding debt. But then you don't tell them that that outstanding debt they could extinguish by taking the money you've left in the life policy. But you leave it as is with the understanding that they will probably know what to do because the money is there. You are expecting a lot from them, let me tell you that. They often don't do it. They often do not do it. Mortgage is sitting there. Suddenly there's a payout in their name. You're expecting them to take money to go pay that mortgage. Obviously, it's the most sensible thing to do. But then again, what do they understand? What do they know about this? They disappear with the money, only to come back empty-handed. You have a responsibility. You open channels of communication. You offset the necessary principles. Let them understand. Open up to them so that they know how these things are handled, right? And lastly, like I said, the issue of money, they need to understand how it works. How long can it last them? When we're talking about $1 million, what do we mean by that? If you're leaving it to them, what's the purpose, right? You don't have to say numbers, but they need to understand at least how it operates, because by then it's going to land in their hands, and whatever happens to it will be strictly up to them. So I've said a lot, right? But this is something that I wanted to just put out there so that you are considerate of as you're planning your affairs, and stop stressing on your own, because these kids need to learn, they need to understand. Also try to rope them in so that they understand how things work. Sometimes you don't even have to spell it out, right, while you're doing certain things, but through incorporating them in everything that we talked about today and more, they gain understanding and skill that they can use when something has happened to you. Listen, if this conversation was useful, just pass it on, right? And come back and then we'll have more discussions like this. Again, my name is Yolanda Mnyengeza. I'm an attorney and a director at Mnyengeza Attorneys. We will see you next time.